In example number 2, we're simplifying the opposite of negative 2 minus 5 minus positive 6. We can see if we turn this all into addition, it makes the problem look more complicated, but it does change it into combining or adding signed numbers. So we have the opposite of negative 2 plus negative 5 plus the opposite of 6. First we simplify the first and third numbers. Now why do we jump from the first to the third? Because those are the ones with double signs. And remember, a number can only really have one sign. So we simplify the opposite of negative 2 to positive 2. And we simplify the opposite of positive 6 to negative 6. And the problem does indeed begin to become easier. Now we have positive 2 plus negative 5 plus negative 6. Now we can note that this time we can either write 2 or plus 2, and they mean the same thing. And then when we start to combine them, I would mentally put the two negatives together first. So negative 5 and negative 6 is going to be negative 11. And then negative 11 plus 2 brings us up to negative 9. In example number 3, we're going to simplify negative 10 minus negative 6. If we think of it as algebraic addition, we say that minus a negative is plus. So this problem directs us to subtract negative 6 from negative 10, but instead we are really going to add the opposite of negative 6, which is positive 6. So we're going to have negative 10 plus 6. So if we're down at negative 10 and we come up 6, we're going to be at negative 4. In example number 4, we're simplifying the opposite of 3 the opposite of 3 minus 5. So instead of subtracting a positive, we add a negative. And that changes the problem to negative 3 plus negative 5. When we add two negatives, we know we get a bigger negative, so we add our 5 and 3 and get our 8 and know that it's negative. Because then we can see that the problem is if I owe you $3 and borrow 5 more, I owe you 8. So the subtraction of integers has to do with opposites being numbers that can be written with the same digits but the opposite sign. So that would be when we have our 3 and our negative 3 are opposites. Also, the reverse always works. Negative 3 is also the opposite of positive 3. And they're the same distance from 0 on a number line. To subtract our integers, instead of subtracting, we can add the opposite. Some people, this might be a good model. For other people, it seems like it might make it more confusing. But instead of subtracting a positive, saying minus positive 3, we add negative 3. Not sure that that works for everybody, because to me, when we simplify it, we really should just look at it as 7 minus 3, and that really makes it back into friendly territory. Remember, 7 minus 3, because a number has only one sign, and this one has a negative and a positive for the 3, which makes it negative, and most of us are pretty comfortable with 7 minus 3 being 4. But again, these other two ways of modeling it are exactly the same value. It's all how you think about it in your head. So instead of subtracting down here, we have, we're adding a positive. So we're saying negative 3, and instead of minus negative 2, minus a negative is plus, so we can say plus positive 2. So we have 2 and negative 3. Because the negative 3 is bigger, we know the answer is negative. The difference between 3 and 2 is 1, and that's why it is negative 1. Here are some problems that we can just practice. Again, I'm going to model several different ways of looking at these, but again, mostly what we're looking for is what is the way that makes the most sense in your way of thinking. I prefer to remove as many symbols as I can. This is negative 5. This is the opposite of negative 6, which is positive 6. This is plus negative 1, which is just minus 1. And suddenly the problem looks a lot easier. If I rearrange it so that I combine my negatives first, I have a negative 5 and a negative 1. That's going to be a negative 6. And I had a positive 6, which I don't have to put a positive in front of, and 6 minus 6 becomes 0. I think that's a lot friendlier. In number 2, we add in the element of a decimal number. But again, let's just start by cleaning up our symbols. We have the opposite of 3.1. Minus a negative is plus, so we have plus 7.5. And when we have plus a positive, we can simplify that to one sign of positive or plus 1.8. Now, if we combine our two positive numbers first, the 7 and the 1 make 8, and if we add our decimals in, our 0.8 and our 0.5, when we combine these all together, we're going to get 9.3. And that's our positive, so I'm going to write it first because I'm more comfortable with my positives first. And then our negative over here was our negative 3.1, so I'm going to make that negative 3.1, and now it becomes a simple subtraction problem. 9 minus 3 is 6, and our 0.3 minus our 0.1 is 0.2. And then I can do it pretty much mentally until I do things like draw a little line through it. I don't know where that came from. But I got 6.2, or 6 2/10. On number 3, again, I want to eliminate as many symbols, so I'm going to put negative 9, negative 2, positive 6, and negative 5. And again, I'm starting to move faster because I want you to see that if you start to understand how this works, it can move faster. Now I would combine all my negatives first because there are 3 of those, and they're going to be bigger. So I could put those first or second, it really doesn't matter. But 9 and 5 are 14, and 2 more is 16. I have negative 16 and positive 6. If I'm way down at negative 16 and I only come up 6, I'm still at negative 10. So I kind of mixed my models there of my temperature or my number line, whatever kind of works in your head. So again, we have another decimal problem. I'm going to rearrange it so that I have my 5.2, and then I know that my opposite of negative, or the opposite of 3.7 is positive 3.7. So I've cut my positives all together now, and then my negative is 2.6, and that should make my problem easier because I'm going to add my positives together first. We're going to get 8.9 minus 2.6. 8 minus 2 is 6, and the 0.9 minus the 0.6 is 0.3, and I get 6 3/10. On my last one, I have negative 8, negative 7, and negative 10. 3 negatives are going to make a bigger negative, so I just have to add them all together. When I look at those, I see 10, 18, 25, so negative 25.